Hello, welcome to a little update on my Kabbalah Wisdom channel. So we're all about Kabbalah Wisdom over here, and I'd like to share with you the most important, very, very complicated wisdom, but effectively, I believe that what's going on is that it's a little bit like the DNA strand. If you know, the DNA, of course, is like a helix. It's like a spiral stairwell, but actually it's a double helix. So they sort of mirror one another, and they go up this like roundabout stairwell. And the same thing is that there is a divine reality and there's an earthly reality, and these two realities, they mirror one another. But of course, if you remember in the olden days, there used to be what's called a negative. A film had a negative. So it was like the picture, I'm not exactly sure how it was, but it was in a negative way. It wasn't exactly the picture. So you have in heaven the picture, and then you have on earth the picture. But the way the two pictures look are not exactly the same, even though they actually mirror one another. And the reason is that they're meant to be a little bit different. So everything in heaven, one of the great stories that explains this is that the Baal Shem Tov once sent a letter to his brother-in-law, who was a great tzaddik. His name was Gershon Kutaver, who lived in Israel. And he said to him that he had done something perceptually wrong, and he prayed for him. They wanted to kill him, but he said that he meant it well, and they decided that he would become blind for 2 months. And the amazing thing that happened was that he wrote back. He said, everything you said is true. However, you sent the letter before the story actually happened. And this actually would happen very often with the Rebbe. I recently just read a story where somebody wrote a letter to the Rebbe. Let's say it was Monday in Israel, and normally it would take a week to get to New York. It would take a week to get back, and they got a letter as a reply the next day. So the Baal Shem Tov explained that in heaven, what happens is that time happens. There are 4 heavens, and time happens in each heaven before ours. So he spoke about the world of Yetzirah, which is 2 heavens above us, and time happens about 20, 30 years before. But when you get to what's called Machshava Hakduma Da'ak, the primordial thought that God had, everything happened there in the same moment. And so, in other words, we are playing out a drama that has actually occurred. And according to quantum physics, this is true. They say there's no reason that we should remember the past and not remember the future, because the future is the past. It's just that we haven't been there, we haven't accessed it yet, but it's there. So the point is that we are a receiver of information. And we obviously have a consciousness, and that consciousness receives, let's call it light, let's call it information. But obviously it receives it within the time that we can accept it, right? So a computer has different speeds. Some computers could download very quickly, some very slowly. Even people have different speeds. Some people download quick, some people download slow. And then there are different things that you're downloading. Some things have more time, some things have less time. And this is an amazing concept to think about, because we all think about reality as reality is outside of us. And therefore, we thought, well, if we could just discover it, it would be quite amazing. We'd be so smart. But actually, when we've looked into quantum physics, what we've discovered is that it's all a miracle. And this is a famous statement in Judaism, that nature is repetitive miracles. As the Baal Shem Tov says, the first time you see a miracle in nature, you call it a miracle. The second time, you call it nature. So it's anything that happens on a consistent basis that you can see, but even though when you delve down into all realms of nature, you find that there's no way we understand how that is happening. For example, DNA, which we're all made of, is splitting all the time, and nobody can figure out how you can take a DNA, cut it in half, and somehow the other half magically appears. It's like cutting you in half, and somehow the other part of you, another half of you, just comes back. So it's a complete miracle. In fact, I heard this from a student in the top university into DNA research in, I think it was in Toronto, Canada, that we don't understand this. And I taught in linguistics department in Kansas University, and I asked them, how do people learn language? And they said, we don't understand. So when you get to the scientists behind it, they say we don't understand. In fact, I had a guy who supervises all the studies of the universities of Switzerland. His name is Dr. Paul Wildman. He had 3 doctorates, genius. And he told me that he was sent around the world to figure out the latest discoveries in science. And the latest discovery is that we don't understand in all fields. And they even call it E. So the bottom line is that when we get to the depth, we don't understand. But that's when you're going down. But when you're going up, when you're going into God, when you're going into the spiritual information, so now you have this correlation of the divine coming within the human. That is something that's infinite, but it happens sequentially. It happens in time. So open yourself up to the infinite wisdom, which God wishes to share with you. And the way you open yourself up is by understanding that wisdom is infinite. And if wisdom is infinite, it's like thinking that just because I went 2 miles on an infinite journey, imagine you're going to go around the world infinite amounts of time. So if you went 2 miles, you actually might have gone 2 miles from the beginning, 2 miles from nothing. But you certainly didn't get closer to infinity, because infinity is going to go on forever. And so it's true, you may be lucky that you stepped away from ignorance. But in terms of wisdom, you are on an infinite, as everybody else's, journey.